everyone, and welcome to our Pistoler guide for Konrad Vollen. We're going to be using the Skaven Killer set, which is the 5-piece which gives a bonus to Pistoler and Banner skills. So for weapons, we're going to be using mostly Magnus's Gift, but we can also use the extra damage off the Taunt weapon for quick boss kills, or the bonus damage on blocks if we're fighting lots of waves. I choose to use Pavis of Anger because it gives me that extra repel damage. For my necks and rings, it's kind of personal preference. I like to get cooldown, damage, crit damage, and crit chance as my main stats I'm looking for in the secondaries, with a bit of armor piercing. So overall, this build is quite strong. I've fought almost all of the Chaos 5 bosses successfully. In our God skill tree, we're going to be using Divine Judgment 3, which is 20% damage reduced and damage done. And then Sigmar's Blessing 3 for the increased damage, energy regeneration, and duration of the skill, so that we can get a lot easier use and uptime on it without having a huge amount of cooldown reduction. So our passives are Divine Judgment, as explained, Mastered level 3 for the 20% damage and 20% reduced damage, Indestructible for that extra damage boost and block chance for survivability, and Bastion Against Corruption for extra damage and damage reduced plus block chance per mob around us. We're gonna, depending if we're using solo or group play, I usually switch around these passives. For our left click, we're going to be using Defensive Strike to up our block chance and get really quick energy gains out of it. And then on our right click, we're going to be using as our primary damage dealer the Pistoler Heroic skill. It does a lot of damage in armor pin. For one, we're going to use our Banner. Great group buff, also great for soloing. Always make sure this buff is down. For our number 2, we're going to be using the Sigmar's Blessing 3. We want to keep 100% uptime on this. We want the rank 3 so we can get the extra damage, the extra energy regen, and allow it to be a 14-second instead of a 10-second duration. For our 3, this is more optional. I choose to use Taunt on number 3, and that's for the extra damage and block chance. For our number 4, I usually use, this is also optional, you can either use Break the Ranks or you can use Charge. I usually use Shield Charge just because it helps generate some extra rage. It's a bit quicker of a boost through enemies. Don't have to worry about the collision as much as Breakthrough Ranks. So how does this build do on boss runs? A lot of people ask me. I can do up to Chaos 5 on pretty much all the runs, but it's quite slow. I usually like to stick to around Chaos 2 if I'm just farming them for loot. I usually run in there, use my 1 to plant down my banner, and then 2 to buff myself, followed by a taunt if there's multiple enemies, or just firing with my right click if there's only one enemy. I'll try and get as many enemies lit on fire as possible for that extra damage buff. You can see that this isn't the greatest run. I've kind of messed it up a little, but it still is quite quick. Under 1 minute run for sure on Chaos 2. So usually that's what you'll be aiming for. You just want around less than a 1 minute run on Chaos 2 or Chaos 1, and then you can get some good efficiency out of it. If you're looking for fragments to either finish off your build or for blessings, usually I recommend going for Grand Relic maps. If you do them on Chaos 1 or 2, you can usually get back more than the money you spend on them, so you can just keep on spamming them if need be, and your gold won't run out. Some mods to worry about when you're running this on Konrad is that if it has minus armor, just don't pick it, because what happens is there's a mod that says minus armor every second, and when you walk into the dungeon after about a minute or 2, you'll just start getting one shot in the relic map, so that's something to watch out for. As you can see, he's really good at fighting groups of mobs. He can just clear waves very quickly and move around the map at a decent pace. Some pros to Konrad is he's very tanky. He has decent clear speeds. His damage overall is decent. The main thing he brings to the table is buffs, debuffs, and a lot of utility as compared to the other heroes. In this build, I'd say it's probably the #1 group spec you could play right now in the current iteration of the game as far as the support build goes, because his banner is going to do such a increase to your nearby teammates, especially when in conjunction with some of the other passives. You could also go into your god tree if you're going for a pure group build to get the extra energy regeneration or extra effects on your banners. Overall, the negatives are that if you're comparing him to some of the other DPS classes, he's a bit slower at farming. Well, not just a bit slower, quite a bit slower at farming some of the really high tier bosses. He's not going to get the same kind of DPS numbers you can get out of the Waywatcher or the Wizard in the current iteration, or even Bragi. But he's more of a safe pick. I can see him really excelling in things like Chaos 5 when you start getting in there in a large group, and also when you start wanting to farm hardcore when the hardcore mode comes out, because he'll be a lot safer of a pick than some of the other characters. Right now, I'd also say that he's decently hard to gear, because you're going to have a bit slower of a start with him unless you're doing group play. You can farm up a lot quicker with some of the other characters, especially since in softcore there's not much of a negative on dying. You can just revive right at your courts very quickly with only a limited amount of gold lost, which you'll only be spending at this point on doing your relic hunts. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below on YouTube, and thanks for watching. Bye for now.